In our series of pre-election segments, we take a look at question 5. A yes vote would approve a tax levy combined with additional state money to be used for housing, parks, and historic preservation. Our guest is one of the supporters, the political director of Unite Here, Local 26, Jamie McNeil. Thank you very much for being with us, Jamie.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
Here in Boston, we have heard a lot about the workers that are represented by Unite Here in Local 26, at least the ones at Harvard in the dining hall. But talk about why this question matters to workers like those.
Housing's always been a priority of Local 26. We, in the early 90s, amended Taft-Hartley, which is the federal law governing union trust funds, to create a housing trust fund. And that allows any member who works in a hotel or after 2 years of service to get a $10,000 down payment for a home. It's really born out of maintaining the character of the city, right? Not only to ensure that workforce people who work in the city can also afford to live here, but also to really maintain that character, right, of the city. It's the other side of the equation in terms of a wage structure, actually having the ability to pay your biggest bill at the end of the month, which is your housing bill. So that's why we support question 5. Housing is one of the #1 issues still to this day, as you can imagine. There's a couple things that question 5 does. It not only creates more affordable housing here in the city, it also preserves historic historic assets here in the city, and it also can be levied towards parks as well. Those 3 things really, I feel like, if you think about Boston 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, you grew up here in the city.
Oh yeah, I've been around, yes.
There is a fear, I think, out there that we're kind of losing our character, our whatever you want to call it, our quirkiness. The places like Kenmore Square. You think about how much it's changed. We really want to maintain that character, and that not only is important in terms of maintaining the people who made up that character, which is a diversity of income levels, diversity in terms of race and occupations, but also maintaining that diversity in terms of historic assets, and that's important on the tourism front, because why do people come and fill our hotels, right? They come to see all these historic assets that we have a real gift here, and it's what makes Boston unique. So we want to keep Boston unique, not only in terms of the people who live here and diverse, but we also want to maintain those parks, those historic assets that make Boston the great place to come and visit as a tourist.
I guess one of the other reasons why money for housing matters so much here is that the other sources, they aren't there the way they used to be.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, this is completely, people confuse this with maybe the BRA or other city funds. This is a completely new source of funding for affordable housing. And it really is, it costs the average person $24 a year. It's nothing. It's a cup of coffee a month. But the fact of the matter is, it's $20 million that allows for leveraging all these different, potentially, dozens of affordable housing projects, and it's that seed money that we really need right now. And this is in addition to other sources of affordable housing. I think the city of Boston, the BPDA has raised that bar a bit, but this is really, I think, the time is right for this in terms of voter sentiment. Times are good. People understand. All this new luxury housing is great, but what about the people? Again, going back to my point, what about the people who actually made this city, that kind of gave it that character that everyone loves and cares about?
Preservation. This is not just for visitors along the Freedom Trail. This could be an old mansion in Roxbury or the Vertulo building in Hyde Park near the Fairmount Station there. So there's a lot of neighborhood history that people in those neighborhoods need to preserve, and I guess it costs a lot to fix those. and you just can't live it strictly to the market.
You know, one thing I was thinking about, now you mentioned this, the Everett Theater in Fairmont Ave, you know, just imagine if we could have that be revitalized, you know, in an area of Hyde Park, right? This is kind of, you know, a neighborhood that, you know, for a period, you know, just didn't get the attention it deserved. If we could have an asset like that in the heart of Hyde Park, where we have, and you know, Antonio's Baccaro and all these new restaurants opening, you know, imagine if we could. I don't think it's a lot of money, but if they have that leverage with this fund, it would be an incredible asset for that neighborhood.
We're talking with Jamie McNeil from Unite Here Local 26. Now, of course, when people hear that this is going to be increasing taxes, they do get nervous, and you know, as I say, you've got all these people in Boston, including many with fixed incomes, trying to keep up with the cost of housing. So, you know, do they have to worry about paying this extra money?
There is an exemption for low-income residents, and the surcharge does not begin until it doesn't begin until after your first $100,000 of property that you own. Again, it's $24 a year, and to me, that, you know, a cup of coffee a month, that is worth it to me to maintain that Boston that I love, you know, and not become a city that's quite frankly, to be blunt, boring, right? We want to maintain the people and the physical assets that make this city a great city.
What about the parks? Because, you know, as I say, compared to some other periods that I can remember, the parks generally aren't all that bad, but I guess parks advocates, you know, they live in close quarters with a lot of this, and I guess there are some places that need some attention too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the one great thing about the Yes on 5 movement here is it's a very transparent process. So the City Council and Mayor Walsh have the ability to, they've made this an incredibly transparent process. So the only restrictions on what the money gets used for, it's 10-10-10. 10% on affordable housing, 10% on historic assets, and 10% on parks. After that, it's really the residents. It's a board appointed by, you know, there's some different commissioners appointed onto it, but then it's the city is appointing this board that basically you can hold hearings. There will be hearings, and it's a very transparent process. Whereas I feel like a lot of the time, these other sources of state and federal money, you don't know where the money comes from, and there's no public discourse in terms of how it's spent. So if you're a parks advocate, you can get out there and make your voice heard to the city council in terms of the hearings, in terms of the projects that you want. If you're an affordable housing advocate, you can push for that. If you are a history buff, you can push for, you know, your project, and it really allows for that civic engagement. That's one of the parts that's really exciting to us.
Well, there seems to be a change in at least the business leadership and coming around to this question, and this reminds me of the history of Local 26 here, because when you started that housing fund way back when, it wasn't just the workers saying this is a priority for us. You got the hotels to buy into it. I mean, there was something in it for them.
The hotels are the ones that fund it. Yeah, absolutely. For every hour worked. There's a real need for talent in the city of Boston, and you know, people just can't, if they're being pushed out of Brockton, if they're being pushed, the further they're being pushed out of the city, the harder it is to find that talent. You know, there was the Italy story in the Globe where they're looking for 600 food service workers. Well, at the time of that story, I think they found 83 or something along those lines. You know, there is a real need for this talent, and the fact of the matter is, if we don't have things like the CPA, what we're talking about right now, if people don't vote yes on 5, you know, we're going to continue to see a city for the rich and not for the people who actually make the city great. You know, the people who work in the buildings and bring that talent to the city.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate it.
Jamie McNeil from Unite Here, Local 26. We'll have more news in just a moment.